How can you be that bright? How can you achieve a lot?
In high school, there were only 2 students who passed from my class, me and a friend. There is a friend who copied the whole dictionary because he couldn't afford. Transformational journey of mine was actually at Addis Ababa University.
From copying textbooks by hand to being a diplomat.
This is Dr. Tesfaye's journey from scarcity to scholarship.
And from local challenges to global diplomacy on the AGI Podcast.
Diplomacy has been esoteric. It has been confined to certain people, state secrets and so on. The whole purpose of diplomacy is to promote the national interest of a nation. It's art of negotiation.
How do you evaluate our performance in international stage?
Our culture is not preparing you to be an extrovert. So it's really hard for many Ethiopian diplomats to mingle and convince people. Pride is good, but who should be proud? There is no need for being proud for the past glories.
How do we overcome our problems?
Yes, colonialism really damaged Africa, but we shouldn't only capitalize on it. Colonialism is one big damage, but there are even more deeper damage from within than outside.
Would you allow your kids to pass through what you passed through? Even though at the end there is a guarantee that they would turn out to be a better people. Dr. Tesfaye, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Abraham. Nice to see you.
The same here. So, it's not always that you get the chance to meet with people having diverse background. Mostly I meet people and bring to the show people of maybe a single background, maybe focusing on computer science, focusing on maybe biology or medicine or something like that. Yours is not like that. Tell us about your journey, your background, where you're from, and all those things. Those things can tell us about you, the things that you value and related matters.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I don't know where to start, but I was born and raised in Addis, south of Addis. Many friends joke on me, you're not from Addis, you're from suburb, because I grew up in Akaki area, which is the industrial city of Ethiopia. I did my studies in public school. I'm not from a well-to-do family, but I did my studies around there. My first degree was in economics. I went to Addis Ababa University. Yeah. The high school journey was not easy because that was the dark time.
Wow.
And there were all kinds of fear that we were undergoing. Material-wise, it was tough to get books. We had Indian teachers and Ethiopian teachers alike. I had a Filipino teacher. We picked here and there their English, right? And reading-wise, there was no technology, there was no internet.
All right.
So the transformational journey of mine was actually at Addis Ababa University.
All right.
The 4 years Addis Ababa University, Sidiskilo.
All right.
Again, that was a tough time in terms of materials, accessing library. There was no internet, there was no data. Our research were done manually. Yeah? There were no computers. We were just using paper. So that's where I did my undergrad studies. In terms of studies, the next chapter was to go to India. I did my international trade. It's like an MBA. And that opened my eyes to the world. The first trip ever I made was to India. I stayed in India for 1 year. I had students from Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Indian engineers. So that course was designed for Indian engineers who were leading big companies to teach them international trade, from theory to practice and to operation. Came back. That was the time when I was at the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
All right.
And again, the journey continued. I want to underline the value of education in my life. Then again, fast forward, I went to UK for my master's.
Another master's.
Another master's in economic policy analysis, University of Nottingham.
All right.
Again, fast forward, I didn't stop. I went to US. I did a 6 years of educational journey at Howard. Again, I would call it post-grad at Georgetown University. I was a research fellow.
All right.
So that's my journey in terms of jobs. The first job I took was the National Bank of Ethiopia.
All right.
I worked for 3 months. I didn't like the environment. It was more of a routine foreign banking division. My dream was to join the research department, which did not happen. Then I joined the Ministry of... I had 2 or 3 job offers while I was in the university. And then I joined the Ministry of Foreign Trade. Later, which became Ministry of Trade first, and the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Yeah.
And then I worked for 6 years. Again, my eye-opener in terms of policy analysis, private sector engagement, export promotion. That's the basics of the foundation of my policy practicing policy. Again, I didn't stop. While I was in India, I had the opportunity to go to the embassy because my university was at New Delhi.
Ethiopian embassy.
Ethiopian embassy, and I was called for meetings because as a graduate student, most Ethiopian students were undergrads, and they kind of invited me. And then that opened my eyes towards working as a diplomat,
Wow.
I visited the embassy, I spoke with people, and so being a diplomat could be something I want to do in the future. I came back, I worked for the Ministry of Trade, and I saw a job advert on the Ethiopian, was it Herald? The Amharic version.
All right.
Addis Ababa.
All right.
Then they had all kinds of job descriptions for counselor, first secretary, second secretary, blah, blah. I kind of fitted to the first secretary job. And there was an exam, a thorough exam, and I kind of made it to the foreign ministry through exams, background check, and interviews. That's
amazing.
The beginning of my diplomatic journey for the next 16 years.
Wow.
And, life continues in terms of twists and turns, accidental. You don't plan it. I never planned it to be a public service. I was actually preparing myself to be an academician.
All right. I kind of can sense a person of that inclination than maybe a diplomat or anything else, but it doesn't mean that you can understand an individual by actually having 1 or 2 conversations. It takes, several conversations to understand where their inclination is. So I have several follow-ups. I was amazed when you mentioned going to university in Ethiopia and Sidiskilo, and you mentioned during the dark time and some of the challenge that you mentioned. But one thing stood out, and I was reminded of my father, who used to tell me, going to school during their times, my dad's times, probably it can coincide in some ways with your time. And he used to tell me, we were bright. And he was referring to our time and calling us, your time is not bright time, and you guys are not that bright. So he was really proud of the time and the opportunities that he had to spend time with people. And you're mentioning some of those things. So you were saying there was no internet, there were no access to some materials, and there was poverty involved as well.
Yeah.
How can you be that bright? How can you achieve a lot
Well,
passing through all those things?
well, there is always a generational conflict, right? In
Yeah.
terms of labeling who's better.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine while I was in high school, there were only 2 students who passed from my class, me and a friend, a colleague.
Oh.
So it doesn't mean the rest are not good or whatever. But so the performance expected from you being passing 2 students from a class, you can imagine the statistical distribution, right? You had to make real hard effort to make it to ESLC.
Yeah.
And my success in ESLC was a work I did in 11th grade and 12th grade. That's when I really said I have to make it to the university. But again, all in all, maybe 5% would pass ESLC or 10%. You can think of the cream of that generation. Again, generation-wise, I also share that assessment in terms of decline. There is a decline in educational quality.
Yeah.
So the effort we did, the effort we made, we were copying books, borrowing books 24 hours, we copy.
Yeah.
Who would do this? So dictionary, there is a friend who copied the whole dictionary because he couldn't afford. So the process of learning when you are copying is solid. Yeah?
A friend copied.
Yes, we are copying. We give assignments like the first 100 page you copy, the next 100 somebody copies, the next 100, and we compile it. We read that book because we couldn't afford books. And there were no books.
I know. If you ask someone from this generation to do that,
that's not.
It would be considered as torture.
They would laugh at you. I know. So that the way we learned was tough, right? And the process of learning is like deeper than flipping through books or internet. So generation-wise, I wouldn't be conclusive in saying that the earlier generation is better than this, but the methodologies, the way we learned, the hardship made the previous generation harder. Deeper thinking, there was no distraction, yeah? There is no distraction in terms of whatever we did.
No, right.
Some people were inclined into politics. I didn't make it to that generation. I'm the next generation. So many bright students were involved in politics and so on because of their need to change the nation, the country.
No, right.
So they had extra time to read, Chinese and Russian political materials, right?
Yeah.
Scientific dialectics material, whatever. So the generation was going through a harder way of learning, so to say.
All right. You mentioned there, the other follow-up I have is about poverty, because this is something that most of us share, especially coming from that background and facing the hardship that most of us face in Ethiopia. If someone, especially during those days, made it to the universities, what is expected is the family will be transforming their lives and they will be having a better life, a stable, maybe provision of goods and other things they want at the family level. And further, you made it to other countries. You went to India for education, then the UK, then the US. So was poverty changed as the household level?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, as a first generation of college students in my family, the perspective changes. As a role model, my niece and nephews give value to education. They kind of emulate me. But again, I went into the most rewarding public service, which is diplomacy. And by going to foreign countries, you have access to resources and so on. If I stayed as a public servant in Ethiopia, things would have not probably change it.
Yeah.
Yes, it did change. As a provider, as an elder son in the house, you cater for your, siblings and your family. In fact, that's a resolve we had from the beginning. As son, that's a commitment you make to change the lives of your close family. Not fundamentally, of course, as an employee, as a whatever, you don't change people's lives. You have to be a businessman. You have to have some sort of business.
Yeah.
But yes, by being a role model and doing some things, supporting their educational endeavor and whatever the needs they might have, you support.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to hear more on the career and some of, the challenge that you saw, or, we have this understanding. You touched upon your stay at the Ministry of Trade and Industry as someone who understands trade and especially international trade, and going to the diplomacy and Ministry of Foreign Affairs that works around there. There is a nuance about all of it. So what is a peculiar thing that you can say, or something that is outstanding you can say you learned from that experience?
There's a lot to learn. First, you have to be giving value to public service, and public service is it requires dedication, commitment, integrity, and so on. But all the way, I never stopped learning. The first 4 years, I did an intensive language study at Addis Ababa University, 6 months. Another one, 6 months of dedicated certificate skills in diplomacy for 6 months. So the first 4-5 years of my initial work experience is filled with skills, right? Education and training. I did so many trainings that were supportive of my career. So in terms of that, once I joined the foreign ministry, the first 5 years I stayed at the headquarters, worked at one of the continental departments, Asia and Pacific Directorate General, as a desk officer. There you have to be a generalist, right? You don't always do economics. I did international relations, I did culture, I did education, political science, conflict, and so on. You become a real diplomat. The 5 years was a lesson for me, a big educational journey. And then I was posted in Tokyo, Japan. That's an altogether different experience. So I learned extensive writing in diplomacy, research not only on economics or trade, some conflicts, international conflicts. I was, covering India, Iran, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and so on. You have to know those conflicts and the ramifications to Ethiopia. Your bosses would ask you someday what's going on in this region. You have to have a research drafted on your table. So you advise. Your role is to advise your leaders, right? So we had researched on all kinds of mujahideen in Afghanistan. It's India-Pakistan conflict, or Sri Lanka Tamil Tigers. These are the things I never heard in school or in the Ministry of Trade.
Definitely. You mentioned a very brilliant point. We have this understanding now with the internet. You can Google and you can cook something up and you can send it out. But during those days, what do you do to know all these things? You may not have a material to read. Wasn't it difficult?
Well, it was very difficult. We used to rely on TVs, VOA, BBC, and so on. But there was I forgot the name. Whether they call it Telegram or Telegraph, Reuters News. It prints the whole night. It prints developments in the entire world, and
Wow.
then that section cuts pieces into different continents. That's a real-time data, right? So we sit down and make sense out of those paper clips. That's the only source, and of course, magazines, papers. The ministry subscribed foreign papers, magazines, and then of course BBC and CNN was the other source. But it was very, very difficult to be on top of what happened, because in the next morning you go to office. In some countries, something might have happened, a coup d'etat or something. Then Ethiopia has to have a position, right? The bosses, the ministers, or the DG might ask you, so something came up, and which position should we take? So you have to be ready at all times. It wasn't easy. It was tough, but when things are tough, you learn that the harder way. Today, it's a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to
not even Google. ChatGPT would do the whole thing.
That's
on your
it.
desk, and it's.
Aren't you jealous of this generation?
I am jealous. Yeah, you could have done something other than research. The time we focused on researching materials. Consumed a lot of time, not the analytical part.
I mean, the most important thing that I can understand from this is we have it today.
Yeah.
But we don't dare touch it. You didn't have it, but you went through the troubles to make sense of clips that are almost non-existent.
Right. I wish I left the foreign ministry like a decade ago. And that was not even a highly internet intensive time. Only Google, we had Google, but the AI brought a different type of navigation. I wonder what the current foreign service people would be adding value to analytical, conflict analysis and so on. Because everybody knows everything, right? I mean, you can Google what happened now, you can ChatGPT, and then you have everything in your palm. So I am honestly, it's tough to have diplomacy now, because the internet made it so. I mean, the communication avenue made it so simple and replacing humans. And imagine with Zoom and Google Meet, you can have a meeting anywhere in the world today.
I mean,
so it's replacing human face to face.
Definitely. I have this friend, a very close friend of mine. He's a business person. He does business, and all he knows about about interacting with people is you call them. But today, this guy is really well versed in ChatGPT and all the large language models. The email he writes
just goes through that,
I mean, it's a professional email. You would be thinking that this guy is Harvard educated or Princeton educated, and everything has changed. Okay, you mentioned diplomacy, and we have an understanding about diplomacy. Growing up, when someone says that they are a diplomat, or if you know some people from that background, you have this understanding that they understand everything about the world. And there's the perception and the reality of it. As someone who's from that background, is a perception that we have also the reality?
There is a big gap of misunderstanding between the practitioners and the population at large. Because diplomacy has been esoteric. It has been confined to certain people, state secrets and so on, but no more. One thing that misses that you miss in the understanding of people is what does diplomacy mean? Diplomacy. Some people say, "Oh, he's a diplomat." It means he uses good language and avoids conflict. That's not the whole purpose. The whole purpose of diplomacy is to promote the national interest of a nation. There is a foreign policy, which is a big document. Then prior to that, there is a national interest you define. And then national security issues, national interest. And then you package those. And this is an instrument you use to promote your national interest. It's art of negotiation. It's art of communication, creating human trust between people, between leaders of the world. Maybe Ethiopia, Kenya, for example, you have to have history of the two countries starting from time immemorial, and then capitalize on the good things. You have to be very astute in knowledge, very skilled. There are all kinds of etiquette issues, but diplomacy is not just talking good to avoid things. There is a crucial element of defining national interest. What is Ethiopia's national interest? Who defines it? How do we package it? How do we write it in a foreign policy form? What is Ethiopia's foreign policy? Yeah. So this is the area of a larger area that people don't really understand. They say, "Oh, he's a diplomat. They wear good suits. They usually joke half protocol and half alcohol." So driving Mercedes-Benz and with flags on their cars and so on. Good receptions. Yeah. But if you really are a diplomacy, if you see the big nations, for example, U.S. Embassy in Iraq had 3,000 diplomats once after the collapse of Saddam Hussein.
Wow.
What does it mean? It had huge force of rehabilitation, whatever, energy, diplomats who cater for conflicts and so on. The U.S. Embassy everywhere has hundreds of diplomats on science, technology, culture, education, terrorism, diaspora, U.S. diaspora, all kinds of trade, investment, copyrights, property rights. This is all administered within the diplomatic mission. So diplomacy it goes beyond security agreements with each country. And of course, there are all kinds of intelligence work done in the embassies. So the scope is larger than people perceive.
Yeah, there is also this perception of Ethiopians being proud, at the same time really reserved people.
Yeah.
As a diplomat, you mentioned skills of negotiation. How do you evaluate our performance in international stage? You had the opportunity to be placed in different places, and you had the chance to witness people in action doing real diplomacy. What is your evaluation?
It's a very big challenge for Ethiopians.
No.
Our culture is not preparing you to be an extrovert, right? All of a sudden, you can't be extrovert.
Yeah.
We are timid in the sense that we don't want to make mistakes, language mistakes, whatever. So it's really hard for many Ethiopian diplomats to mingle and convince people. I've seen those. If you study what you're doing and you have a mission, you can do that. But as a well-informed conversant and dialoguing with people, we have language deficiency. In whatever language, not only English, but could be Chinese or French. We don't have a daring diplomat. Of course, part of the problem emanates from the way we are shaped in the ministry, not to make mistakes. Communication is not really encouraged. You make mistakes on media, then you are recalled.
Wow.
So a whole lot of combination of factors makes an Ethiopian diplomat very low profile, low key, they call it. Even in receptions, we tend to circle within our groups or with somebody. The whole idea of going to reception is to go around, network, sell your ideas, buy somebody's ideas, and so on. But most of my colleagues had tough time. I mean, in terms of delivery. This doesn't mean we are below standard, but if you see real diplomats, They are well versed. They talk movies. They talk literature.
Wow.
They talk media. They talk sports. They talk everything. If it's not only you go and talk about Ethiopia, right? You just start conversation by talking about football, American football or British football or whatever, or swimming or Olympics. So diplomat, you have to make some level of, there has to be a connection between you and your partner. Then you can go to a deeper, The Americans call it small talk.
Yeah.
So you have to have small talk to go into you can't come and say, oh, no, let's discuss our business. You need to have some level of connection with your partners. And we have some difficulty in that regard.
Absolutely.
This is an open secret.
Yeah. I mean, do we have to address it or leave it open? I mean, it's been a question for generations.
Yeah.
Some people say these days, this generation is really well spoken and I mean, they are really confident in whatever they are saying. But I have difficulty understanding whether or not these kids can go to the depths that is expected to understand the issues that they have to deal with. For example, as a diplomat, Gen Z or anyone from the millennial generation, do you think they have what it takes to really understand what is at stake about the interest of the country, Ethiopia, and what Ethiopia wants and how to actually engage with as a people? So there is this dilemma, there is this understanding gap. Even this generation labeled as confident, I don't think they would care to understand the nuances. What is your observation there?
In terms of making networks and so on, this generation is better.
All right.
In terms of assertions too. That's not the whole, that's not the end of it. You need to cover before you discover. You have to be knowledgeable. The previous generation I was referring had knowledge, still have knowledge, but the communication part, the being extrovert part is missing.
Yeah.
But this generation has to be solid in terms of knowledge, right? Covering the substance content.
Yeah.
It's not only just you go out and talk people and try to convince, but you need to have the instrument, the tool, the knowledge itself. So we have a better generation in terms of that, but we need to also to work on substance and contents this generation has. But again, diplomacy cannot be. It's not like an ordinary job. You need to recruit people who have tendency, good in communication, but good in solid, good in knowledge too. Political science, economics, culture, history, conflict, and a number, tech savvy. They have to be technology, tech savvy, right?
Yeah.
So being extrovert is one quality that we need to, and people can be trained. The Americans, the Japanese, the Indians train diplomats. Not only they give very hard exams, very tough to pass, but they train 1 year, 2 year.
All right.
Until they become full-fledged diplomats. So in Ethiopia, that can be done.
Also, there is this culture of the Americans or the West in general. If you commit some kind of mistake, that is taken as a learning experience. I heard some professor from China talk about her experience living in both China and in America. And she was expressing how she thinks about these entrepreneurs in China, the likes of Jack Ma, and she was comparing him with the likes of Elon Musk of the US. And she was making it about educational background and how Americans are trained, or people in the West are trained and people in China are trained. I think there is some similarity between the Chinese and the Ethiopians. If you commit a mistake, that's it. People start laughing and you'll be labeled some way. And in the US, if you commit a mistake, you learn from it.
Yeah.
Then the next time you are a different person. Do you think we need to adopt a different way of life, maybe in terms of our education or in terms of how we engage people and how we think what a mistake is and what it results to?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to necessarily follow either or.
All right.
Right? We can learn from the best from the US
All right.
and the best from China, not only China, from Japan. Confucian culture, the value to education, hierarchy, societal hierarchy, culture, but modernization.
Yeah.
In the US, what I like about the US is people make mistakes. They cover up. They don't lose confidence. Making mistakes doesn't have that much consequence unless you are somewhere very important. Make the degree of tolerance in the US is much higher, and colleagues and your superior, your leader, your superiors they cover up. So people are not afraid of mistakes. If they don't know anything, they say I don't know. It's not a big deal. It's a very common phrase now. This is not my area.
Yeah.
This is not my expertise. Yeah.
Yeah.
But on your work, on the job description, they expect you to perform.
Yeah.
You fail, that's fine. You find another job. But in Asia, there is a serious consequence.
Yeah.
The Asian culture in Japan, you can't make a mistake and continue as a public servant. You take consequences. Maybe you are fired, you are jailed, whatever, and people commit suicide.
Wow.
For showing lag in their performance. Big corporations, if a corporation fails, it's a big time grill for the president, and they take all kinds of consequences. You know about harakiri, right? The Japanese are known for, it's not known, but there is this culture of committing suicide.
Yeah.
With your pride. You kill yourself with a sword. It's called harakiri. The consequence is too much in there. It's a perfection society. But this generation is against that. There are certain developments to improve this thinking. But again, to come to your question, we can have a hybrid of the Asian and the West. We can have an Ethiopian Ethiopian way of doing things. We can't be US because this is completely a new area for us, or Japan or Asia. No. We can be Ethiopians.
Yeah. All right. Amazing. So I know that you've had that opportunity to go to Japan and be placed as a diplomat in other places, including the UAE and other different places. Yeah. But as someone who actually served in public, leaving Ethiopia and going to the US to have a different experience, tell me about that feeling. We'll talk about Howard University and the other things, but tell me about that experience.
It wasn't a pleasant experience, but family circumstances forced me to resign from my job.
All right.
Secondly, there is a certain time of your maturity, or I don't know what you call it, but my glory days were ending in the foreign ministry. Let me put it that way.
Wow.
So I said, okay, if this is not my space, then I have to leave. I left in 2012, and I went to join my family in the US. It wasn't a good landing, like any immigrant. But I had already lived for 7-8 years out of US, out of Ethiopia and out of US. So I know what it means to live in a kind of foreign country. Yeah? I lived alone in Japan in a small apartment, or in Dubai, or in Khartoum, or in the UK, or India. So it's not a new thing altogether, but the US has its own character, its own nature, its own ecosystem, whatever. So, in terms of marketing myself, coming from being a diplomat to in the job market was not easy.
All right.
But I had always dreamed of pursuing my education. But luckily, I landed on that. I worked on different kinds of company jobs, which I did not like. But eventually, we established our own business within the family, which gives me leverage, to travel and so on. So it wasn't an easy journey, but so it was a fulfilling journey. To live with your family is one thing, and I had the pleasure of reading and writing from the leisure time I had. Yeah, that's what I can say. Living as a diaspora, a proper diaspora, has its own challenges, and you want really to contribute to the development of this nation by giving back and trying my best to join different organizations. So that's where I am now. Yeah.
The identity question. I mean, from the very outset, we mentioned that Ethiopians, proud people, Adwa,
right?
No being colonized, having a peculiar experience about experiencing life itself, and going to the US, the melting pot, where everything presumably happens. How did you find yourself in that environment, and given your background, given everything that you have?
I mean, the US is not some place remote and where you don't find Ethiopians. There are a number of Ethiopian friends, family. So you mix easily, But if it was somewhere remote or somewhere where you don't find fellow citizens, it would require your skills for integration and so on. So it was easy, but again, you find purpose in your decisions. You refine your purpose. You refine your objectives. You refine your trajectory, your journey. So I don't know if I answered your question, but in there, I did not, apart from school and workplace, I always stay with Ethiopian friends, Ethiopians and family, which doesn't really make you very aggressive in mixing with the rest of the races, like the whites or blacks, Jamaicans, Koreans, or Indians. So there is some sort of inhibition, like if you want to call it that way. And this is in DMV area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, where Ethiopians and some people who live in other states, remote states, they mingle, they mix with people, and they create some impact on their on the perceptions of other people. You talked about pride, Ethiopian history, and so that's a big misconstrued thing. Pride is good, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. But who should be proud? There is no need for being proud for the past glories. You can be pragmatic. We have done, the previous generation made marvels. Adwa, Lalibela, Aksum, and so on. But what have you done? And you shouldn't be prouder for the past forefathers, accomplishments. Do what you do and make it perfect. This pride thing it comes as a liability for most, because it alienates Ethiopians from the rest of Africans. We have never been colonized. We have unique alphabet. We are the origin of humans. We have coffee and other crops and so on. This is okay in terms of marketing the country, branding, but it shouldn't be a day-to-day source of pride. It doesn't add up to being African. Most Africans are not, I can't say most, but I've seen other people comment on Ethiopians. You guys think differently, yeah? It doesn't necessarily mean a positive thing. When people comment you are different, this is like a divide and rule. You should be very careful about this nomenclature. This language is divisive. We are Africans. They shouldn't lead you to identity crisis. People have identity crisis. We are black, the black nation. So that I leave it there, but the misconception continues. We have to teach ours from school that this is a black nation. This has a fate, an African fate. Nobody recognizes you to be other than African. There is no identity called, Ethiopian within the African countries. We are all, Africa. So that much I can say. Though the pride thing is really overrated and really creating some gap in terms of understanding between us and the rest of African. You can use it correctively in the proper context, not use it every day to create some rift, cleavage. So, that's what I can say. Yeah.
But I know you have a love for Africa, and I heard you talk about Africa in different ways. And the understanding you have of Africa, maybe you got it from being a diplomat in some of the countries in the continent. But I also think that your experience at the university may give you this nuanced idea of what Africa is and how we consider ourselves to be in relation to the reality of what being Africa is. Would you say your stay in the US and studying issues related to Africa helped you understand Africa better, or your stay, your background as a diplomat gave you that perspective?
It's a number of things. The first encounter to the knowledge on Africa comes from the university days. I was doing a development economics course, a 2-term, by the late famous professor Ishatu Chole. And he taught us development problems of the third world.
All right.
The classification: first world, second world, third world.
I always use it. Yeah.
We belong to the third world. And most of the development problems were in Africa, Latin America, and some part of Asia. And the literature is millions. Many researches have been done. So I know African problems from then, like 2 semesters of development economics. And then fast forward, I went to India. I was with African students in the program.
Right.
There were about 5, 6. We pretty much lived together. Yeah. Then while working as a diplomat in Tokyo, particularly, there was an African Diplomatic Association. And oftentimes I got the comment that you are different. How do you mix with us? The previous people were not as active as, I took it as a compliment, but I really forced myself. There are tendencies where they kind of have closer relationship other than me, like the East African diplomats. Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya have similarities. West Africa has similarities. The South Africa, Malawi, Zimbabwe, and so on. I was mixing with all. And finally, the final learning was in the US and in the UK, but particularly in the US, because at Howard, that's the Mecca of the black. And probably over 90% of the students are African Americans, and the professors. So that's where I not only learned development issues, but other perspectives about Africa. So every time I was polishing my perspective, I was polishing my understanding about Africa. I read deeper articles and books about Africa, gender issues, violence, culture, education and social change. These are courses I never took in my previous school years. I read many non-economics books, right? I wrote articles on Egypt, on Sudan, on Kenya, not only Ethiopia, but many other, things, and terrorism, foreign policy, and about China, Africa. There are many papers I wrote. So during that, I really grasped a lot about Africa. And I wouldn't say this is something remarkable or like different from other people, but the perspective I have has really become better in understanding.
Great. Mentioning about Africa and not talking about the problems that we have, especially with an individual like yourself, with a deeper understanding of the problem of the continent, especially in relation to development and the challenge of poverty that we have. There is this understanding within the African community, but I'm not saying it's a comprehensive understanding, or I'm not saying this is what every African understands their problems to be. But we say colonial powers came to Africa, and everything that we think of ourselves have been vanished, and a new identity is given to us. So we have this poverty, we have disease, we have all kind of problems that we're trying to get rid of or overcome, but we're not overcoming them because of the intricacies of the deeper divisions that were created because of the colonial powers that happened in the past. So do you agree with this assertion, or we have a different way that we have a route we have to take to get out of our problems? Accepting that we have the problem, do we need to take a new path or a new route, or do we need to study our problems, see what the white people or the colonial powers did in different times, because it has been going on for several years and the problem has been persisting within the continent of Africa in different countries. So generally, how do we escape, or how do we overcome our problems?
This is a very, very difficult question to answer in a short conversation, but we can lay the frame of discussion in such a way that development problems are not unidirectional. They are multiple in nature, particularly when you talk about Africa. Yes, there was colonization. Yes, there was slavery. Africa has been annexed with Europe. It's Europe's backyard. But think about this. All nations in the world have been colonized except few countries. The US was colonized. Canada was colonized. Australia was colonized. Japan colonized Korea, Taiwan, and so on. Philippines, every single country in the world, India, were colonized. Colonization per se hasn't really, you can't say colonization has really shackled, destroyed Africa, because other nations had the same fate. But slavery did the biggest, very huge damage to African psyche. The African colonization is different because of what they have done. They did in Berlin Conference in 1886 or so, if I remember correctly. The Berlin Conference, they sat down, and they divided Africa into who takes this part, who takes that part. Officially, colonization by decree or by whatever international, they kind of made it international treaty. So African map was redrawn. There were boundaries before the colonialists came. These are new territories based on whatever they wanted to do. So these are artificial boundaries. We have conflicts all over Africa. And not only that, even after the decolonization of Africa, Africa remains supplier of primary exports, primary products to Europe. They haven't done anything in terms of manufacturing, building the capability. No single country has prospered when they left Africa. Yeah. So the language, the dependency, everything, the education, the curriculum, etc., follows the colonial route. There are countries now who are dictated from Paris or from London, from whatever. Huh? So, yes, colonialism really damaged Africa, but we shouldn't only capitalize on it. We have our own governance issues. We have our own undemocratic political systems. There is no power competition. You see leaders staying 40 years, 47 years, 30 years. This is not something that encourages development. This generation needs to be represented. Every generation, every diverse group needs to be in the power. There has to be a power sharing. We have to have inclusive institutions, not exclusive. Most African institutions have exclusive institutions. There is massive corruption. And there are within domestic conflicts in many countries and international conflicts or interstate. So the list is endless. We can talk about this for long, but again, to answer your question, colonialism is one big damage, but there are even more deeper damage from within than outside. So much I can say about colonialism.
Yeah. I understand the institutional problems that the continent has and the problems that are created by its own leaders, the sons and daughters of Africa, and all these layered problems that we have. But do you see anytime soon, maybe in our time while we are alive, that Africa can be independent in terms of, self-sufficiency, the economy, and provision of whatever the people of the continent needs by the nations within the continent? Do you really believe that we can be, no, that's against my sovereignty, so because it negates my sovereignty, I'm not accepting any kind of development support, whatever its nature is, be it any kind of commercial loan or concessional loan or whatever from any development organizations, the multilaterals or the bilaterals. Do you believe there will be that time, like we say, this is it, guys? We are Africans, so you're not coming to interfere in our development, in our conducting of business, be democracy or any kind of democracy that we can forge within the continent. Because I really long for that kind of day. I really think of the continent and think of Ethiopia as well. And you can be proud about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you're a recipient of some kind of aid or some kind of support. So do you really believe there will come a time?
Yes, there will be a time. But again, there is one Ethiopian saying, a wise baby cries while eating. Yeah, he doesn't say, I don't want to eat. I will keep on crying. But it's a wise baby, wise boy's decision, whatever. Aid is not bad necessarily. Part of a study I made in UK was about aid and conditionality, whether aid boosts growth or development in the real sense of the word. But development aid is not bad. South Korea had huge aid from US. Now look at where South Korea is. Look at other countries, even within Africa. There is hope in Africa. If you look Botswana, Mauritius, Cape Verde, even Ghana, and some countries are on their own. South Africa, look at South Africa, is almost a developed nation, right? They get almost zero aid except on health from US. Ethiopia has done remarkable job in terms of getting huge aid, putting it on the ground, on public infrastructure, and so on. So you can really receive aid, which is not bad, but you have to have a graduation. You have to graduate someday. And okay, now you say, I'm a sovereign nation, I don't accept aid. You have to be a wise boy by saying, okay, I will take this for certain amount of time. I'll build on my capability. But again, you can't say, I mean, look at the aid market. I mean, you can say I'm a sovereign nation. I don't want to compromise my policy space. There is a policy space. They want you to erode. But you have to have a good institutional capability, a good government, a good state culture to say, okay, I will take this aid, but not in the form of eroding my policy space, or you don't decide for me. So I'm optimistic about Africa rising to that situation, but we have to have transparency, participatory systems, governments, civic society, academics. You know, governments in Africa are just sacrosanct. They don't involve the wider society. They only represent certain interests, right? So nations can be built by their own citizens. It's not a miracle. We have issues in Africa, yes. We'll continue with these problems for certain time. But we have hopes, like the nations I mentioned. Botswana is a prosperous country. Mauritius, Cape Verde, the West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria might have its own issues, but again, a big economy. There is a hope in Ethiopia too. I say the north is different because of their history, because of their
the north,
society, the northern part of Africa,
the Maghreb region.
So when we talk about Africa, we're talking about sub-Saharan.
Yeah, definitely.
This is a category of the World Bank and so on. They say sub-Sahara, excluding South Africa and the northern. Where this is where the chunk of poverty exists. So when I say Africa, I refer to the sub-Saharan. But there is again optimism.
There is this picture of whenever the word sub-Saharan Africa comes, there is a mother who's actually in a very bad condition, carrying a baby, and there is some kind of water that she's carrying. So that's a depiction of sub-Saharan Africa. So the Maghreb region, so those states like the likes of Egypt, Morocco are not included in.
So this is ethnographers who divided Africa in different types of civilization. Deeper, I mean, again, to negate what I said, the damage done on Africa, the ethnographers who came as a civilizing mission divided Africa in different categories. And, they said, okay, these people need to be civilized, the white man's burden. And so that's where colonialists, when they came, they had a roadmap, an endorsement of this policy. They said, okay, these are subjects of Europe. So they did what they did. They produced knowledge. We need to produce knowledge now, African indigenous knowledge. We cannot be subject to any Western powers. We need to rise. We need to have cohesion in society. We need to be participatory. Involve everybody. This is everybody's stake. Leading a country is everybody's stake. It's not somebody's territory and the rest is just watching, nations fail.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. You remember a friend that I mentioned around the beginning of this conversation who is a business person but started using ChatGPT, and this friend sends a very articulate, a very professional email. This friend mentioned something along the lines of the points that we mentioned right now, and we talked about a book, and in the book, the Marshall Plan is mentioned in several places.
Right.
So he has this understanding about the Marshall Plan and how Europe overcame the problem after World War II,
Second World War.
the Second World War. And the Europe that we know today is forged after that time. Essentially, it was provision of aid or support, one-time support that Europe received, and it became the Europe it is.
Yeah.
The reason he said, after understanding the whole thing and how we Africans can overcome the same way the Europeans overcame, is if we only can invest in human development. He thinks because Europe was educated before the Second World War,
Yeah.
and what came after the Second World War, the development and the reconstruction of the whole Europe, is because they had this background of understanding, knowledge, and their human development was better, well done. But for Africa to actually graduate and become self-sufficient, we need to especially work on our human capital. Is that a point that you agree with?
Yes, I definitely agree. But the Marshall Plan was a proactive foreign policy of US. They had a visionary foreign policy from Secretary of State, Marshall. They allocated $13 billion to rebuild Europe after the Second World War. Think about this. US supporting Europe was not for Europe's sake, but for the sake of its interest, because they needed a strong partner, strong markets, strong ally in the real sense of the word. So they had to rebuild, and it paid off. Europe was rebuilt in no time. Now Europe and US cooperation is very solid, apart from here and there, some issues. Whether Africa should have a Marshall Plan is debatable, but it doesn't hurt. It's good. I mean, if the world agrees on Marshall Plan, there are even people talking about compensations for slavery and colonization. Yes, why not? I mean, if Africa gets a resource, that's fine. But we have got enough resources that we have not utilized. Let's count every dollar on the ground. Whoever has invested on real issues on poverty reduction. There are some certain cases. In other cases, there is also corruption. So it's good if we get 100, 200 billion for Africa as a Marshall Plan, but do we utilize this money effectively in the way that it addresses the current problems? That's debatable. We need to have a governance, in each nation that's transparent, that's accountable, that's pro-development, pro-people. So again, I wouldn't disagree with the concept of Marshall Plan, but human capital, as your colleague mentioned, investing on human capital. It's not even human resource. This nomenclature, this phrasing is bad. Human capital can do miracles. Look at Japan or South Korea. They don't have any resource other than human capital. They sent their people in the 19th century, 20th century, all over Europe, all over US. They invested on them. They came back. They did miracles on the ground. Chinese diaspora, Indian diaspora, human capital. So they can transform a nation. This is a huge investment that can transform a nation. So I definitely agree with your friend's assessment. Also, a little bit of Marshall Plan. That's if we get more money, that's fine. But we have other homework to do. Homeworks.
If we get more money, I'm a bit skeptical, because the corrupt officials that we talked about earlier would be the ones managing the whole thing after all. So a mindset shift is one thing, but how can we change how they think about the money that they will be using? They accuse us of, or especially the leaders of most of the country, the country's leaders, people who are going to Dubai and these other fancy places, putting on shoes or putting on watches that are really expensive.
Yeah.
And these people come back to Africa or whatever their country is, and they lead these desperate people for food, for sustenance. So how are we going to deal with the leaders that are going to have their hands on the aid or the support, whatever the nature of the support that will be receiving? They will be having their hands and they will be managing all that.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story.
All right.
I was in Tokyo once, and there was a TICAD forum, Tokyo International Conference on African Development. And all African leaders were invited. And I was in the committee, steering committee, representing Ethiopia. And then we were talking about how best our leaders could be accommodated in Tokyo. You would be laughing the kinds of issues African diplomats were raising, how best their leaders would be accommodated in the best 5-star, how they were resisting to go in one bus, how they were raising the issue of guns, to bring big guns with the leaders. Japan is the most peaceful society. And then we had a very pragmatic leader, prime minister. We were representing him, and one of the things we got as an instruction from him is, he said, I will stay in whatever hotel the Japanese government assigns me. And that was a big relief for us. Others were squabbling about which, and then fast forward, the delegates came, right? Our delegation composed of 5 or 6 people. I don't want to name a country from West Africa. They brought 300 people.
Oh my God.
The whole city was like flooded with money. They had VIP limousines. And the venue was crowded with limousines. The Japanese, that conference was about helping Africa. And some leaders brought briefcases of dollars. And when we were accompanying our delegates to the markets, electronic markets, these 300 people were like scavenging for electronics. So imagine that country, how much money they spent to even get aid. So the very idea of getting aid was just, a laughing stock and after the delegation left, we had an assessment from the Japanese, and the Japanese papers wrote, this is Africa. Africans came to get aid, but the way they were spending money lavishly and complaining about, even to get to the hall, you get a badge for 4 or 5 people. How would you get a badge for 300 people?
Oh my gosh.
So, this is self-defeating. And if I was a Japanese government representative, I would be questioning this. Yeah? And
because you're a diplomat, you would be questioning, but I'm not a diplomat. I wouldn't be questioning. I would throw these people away.
Well, these are all kinds of sovereignty and what anybody can do. But we had a very pragmatic government then. As I said, very low-key, small number of the delegation. They thanked the Japanese government for hosting them in a hotel of their choice, not our choice. So a big lesson for me. But the rest of when we were meeting in the hall, it was a big fight. A fight of getting 5 stars. The best, not only 5-star, like presidential suits. presidential suites are very few, in a hotel. Maybe Sheraton would have maximum of 4. So getting those, one out of those, it was like a fight for, that kind of allocation. So again, as I said, we have huge resource deficiency in Africa, but we are also wasting public money with corrupt practices and being unaccountable. So there are all kinds of issues related to governance, the way we govern our people. African nations govern their people.
It's really fascinating to hear you say all those things about a continent and your experience beginning from your school time to this point. Are there moments, special moments that you remember, and those moments could be moments of significance for who you are today? Maybe you could mention 3 or 4 moments.
One of the things was the defection from my economics comfort zone to diplomacy.
All right.
There are friends who joke on me, you ran away from economics because I was a good student, right? And they said, you would have made a very good economist then. Why are you in the territory of somebody's? That decision, a daring decision to go into somebody's field, really shaped the way I am today. Grappling with political science and conflicts. These are things. I'm a very good person in maths in the university, and all of my maths courses are A. I'm a person of numbers. So political science, conflicts were new. But so again, I learned something, and that's one thing. The other thing was my decision to leave foreign service. Again, that was a daring decision. My friends were against this decision. But I said, okay, if I'm not worse in the foreign ministry, I could be worse somewhere else. I mean, I don't want to name it that way, but I said, I have to market myself somewhere else. I'm not, always belonging somewhere. I can be of maybe better service in other areas. Let me leave the place for other younger diplomats. So those decisions, 2 decisions, are very crucial. Challenge, I don't know if you mentioned the challenge, but there was challenges in my diplomatic career. One is when I was transferred to Dubai. I was the first person to open the embassy, the consulate. There was nobody. I was in a hotel for how many months, God knows. And I had to do admin work, construction of office, and so on without support. That was the summertime. I really, really was challenged then. I had no salary because the salary would be transferred once you have official status. The official status came later. I was not reading or speaking Arabic. When we were taking communication on English, with English, not verbal, to the foreign ministry, I don't want to say this, but they were throwing this not verbal back to us. You have to write them in English.
In Arabic?
In Arabic, sorry.
All right.
So I was almost frustrated then. For the next 4 or 5 months, that was a tough one. So again, the type of work you would do in the consulate was something I never expected, because we have hundreds of thousands of housemaids, domestic workers. We have issues with them. They are abused, no salary, no wages. They are thrown out of house, and they are runaways. Some are in illegal jobs. And there are middlemen who are trafficking humans.
Yeah.
So this is something I was not ready. I was transferred from another mission, and I was told to do a commercial work, trade and investment, because Dubai has huge potential. You need to, address those investment and trade and economic sabotage. There were trade sabotage too. So I was completely overwhelmed with these burning issues. I had to visit prisons. I had to go to immigration office, police stations. So I was really not ready for that. So the challenge was very, very, very frustrating. It was a small mission, no budgets, no vehicles, small vehicles, maybe 2-3 staff. The budget was not approved. It was hell,
Sorry to hear that.
No, I mean, this is something that really helped me to learn things the hard way.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Mostly, we talk about circumstances that we embrace among friends, and some of us talk about what we passed through and the challenge that we face in life. It could be a career-related challenge or other kind of challenge. And I sometimes think, would I let my son pass through the problems that I passed through made me the person who I am today.
Right.
I'm providing for the kids I have and the family I have because of all those challenges. But thinking about my kids, I say, would I let one of my sons go through the problems I had gone through? I say, not at all. Not even for a second.
Yep.
So you told me about the schooling you had and the problems you faced. You made it through all those problems, and now you're living a very good life. Would you allow your kids to pass through what you passed through, even though at the end there is a guarantee that they would turn out to be a better people or better persons?
Man, that's a tough question because, of course, no. I mean, I don't want kids to pass through those kinds of tough, unmet demand situation. But again, the moral principles, the ethics I learned, the poverty I know, the kind of communal life I have lived has shaped who I am now. I wish that kind of flavor is in my son. I have a son, and of course, no, I wouldn't want kids or even my kid to pass through that deficiency, shortage mentality. But again, what doesn't there is a saying,
what doesn't kill
you makes you stronger, right?
Something like that.
There are, the present generation. You tell them your life's trajectory. This is like a fairy tale to them. Oh, this is your time. No, it's not about me wanting him to go through that, but you have to learn, pick things from there. His being is part of my life's journey, right? My life's failure or success. Learn the good things, the moral principles, and the giving back sentiment, and so on and so on. But every parent makes sure their children or her children would not repeat the mistakes and the problems they have faced in their lives. I'm sure this is the case in probably 100% of the cases. Parents make sure they don't fail their kids. They have a better world. They have a better secured world, materially, spiritually, or in whatever way. So in that regard, I would say yes and no.
All right. I mean, I don't have the courage to say one of my kids do this, and I sometimes, my dad is this very strong figure, and he all the time advocates for strengths. And I start telling my kid, do this. And when he start doing that, I'm like, Stop it.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult. We think about the problems that we overcame, and we know that subconsciously those problems are the ones that made us who we are.
Right. Yeah.
The better or the worse.
Yeah.
So that's the main reason I mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, I believe in providing material, whatever support on the basis of performance.
Yeah.
Incentivize. It's you work, you get salaries or profits. If you don't work, you don't get anything, right?
Yeah.
So this is the way the world functions. So there is no free. If you get salary free, not working, would you come to work? You don't, right? If the check is sent to your house or transmitted, you have to earn it. So we have to, from our houses, from our family instances, we have to incentivize performance. They have to know this is unlimited. This is not unlimited resource. This is limited resource. This is how you function, how you perform, and get your compensations in the future. So no, there are families who, even in Ethiopia, they give iPhones to high school students or even middle school. Yeah. The kind of attire you see, the kind of money they carry. I mean, that's not the way it should be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't want to label it, make it scarce, like scarce mentality, but incentivizing performance on the needs basis.
Absolutely.
And you have to have a continuous dialogue. This generation is very, very not willing to follow every advice you give them. But at the end of the day, they will learn the hard way.
Absolutely. This has been a very wise conversation. I learned a lot. And my understanding of different things is now better and deeper than the moment we met. So I really thank you so much for the opportunity to come here and to learn from you. And this has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Abraham. It's been a very, very interesting conversation we had. I would like to thank you for inviting me to come to your podcast. I hope we'll meet sometime in the future.
Absolutely. There are questions that I had to ask, but I didn't because of thinking about the second time.
Okay.
So the second time we'll be having a deeper conversation about several other things, including international trade and the intricacies around there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Abraham. Thanks.
All right.